Since the beginning of time, humanity has feared the darkness. We've cast shadows on the unknown, sculpting creatures out of our deepest anxieties, monsters that blur the lines between man and beast. Among them, none have captivated the human imagination quite like the werewolf. Tonight, we journey into the fog-shrouded past, to ancient lands and forgotten texts, to whispered tales and blood-soaked fields. We seek to unravel the truth behind one of our oldest nightmares, not through fantasy but through the lens of real-life cases, documented accounts that suggest the impossible may not be as far-fetched as it seems. But first we must start at the beginning. The werewolf myth does not begin in Europe, as many assume. No, its roots stretch back further, deep into the sands of ancient Mesopotamia, where man first wrote myth into clay. There, gods with animalistic forms roamed the stories of the Sumerians and Akkadians, deities who were part wolf, part man, beings like the goddess Lilitu and the Epic of Gilgamesh, which speaks of wild men living with beasts outside civilization's grip. These were not the cursed howlers of modern lore. They were wild, powerful, connected to the earth, closer to nature, yet alien to society. Here we see the earliest seeds, the idea that man and beast are not separate, that under the right conditions they may become one. In ancient Greece, the philosopher Herodotus wrote of the Nuri, a tribe from Scythia said to transform into wolves for several days each year. The legend may have been born of ritual or misunderstood custom, but its presence in historical text gives us pause. These were not fairy tales. They were accounts. Later in Rome we hear of Lycaon, a king cursed by Zeus for feeding human flesh to the gods. His punishment? Transformation into a wolf, a tale from which the term lycanthropy was born. But as we move through time, the werewolf becomes darker, more sinister. As Christianity spread through Europe, the church sought to purge pagan beliefs. Yet instead of erasing the werewolf myth, it reshaped it. Now the werewolf was no longer a wild man or nature spirit. It was a servant of the devil. In medieval Europe, fear ruled the land. Witches, demons, and beasts were blamed for everything from crop failure to disease. And so, the werewolf became a scapegoat, a human possessed, corrupted, or cursed. In France, tales of loup-garou, men who hunted children under the full moon, spread terror through the countryside. In Germany, werewolf became associated with witchcraft, and in Eastern Europe, werewolves were often indistinguishable from vampires, cursed souls doomed to return from the dead, thirsty for blood. Meanwhile, in Norse mythology, the Ulfhednar were warriors who wore wolf pelts into battle, believed to channel the animal's ferocity. Here the transformation was embraced, even honored, a stark contrast to the Christian view, which framed it as sin. Even in Africa, Asia, and the Americas, tales of man-beasts persisted. In India, tiger men stalked the jungle. In Native American folklore, skinwalkers could take on the form of wolves and coyotes. And in Ethiopian lore, hyenas were feared as corpse eaters and witch doctors. Each culture molded the werewolf myth to fit its own fears, its own truths. But beneath the variations lay a single primal question. What happens when the human mask slips away? By the 18th and 19th centuries, werewolves had slithered their way into fiction. No longer confined to oral tales or court documents, they became symbols of repressed desires, of rage, of the monstrous other lurking within. In literature, the werewolf evolved. In 1831, Captain Frederick Marryat published The Phantom Ship, one of the first novels to feature a werewolf as a tragic character. Later, in Guy Endor's 1933 novel The Werewolf of Paris, we see the creature as a tortured soul, a victim of urges he cannot control. Then came Hollywood. The Wolfman, starring Lon Chaney Jr., introduced audiences to the image we now know, a man cursed by a bite, doomed to kill under the full moon. The silver bullet, the pentagram, the fog-drenched moors, these became canonical. But more than that, the Wolfman gave us something deeper, a metaphor for the beast within us all. The owl. Werewolf was no longer just a monster. He was a man, a father, a friend, a lover, until the curse took hold. And as decades passed, the werewolf adapted. In the 1980s, we saw grotesque transformations in An American Werewolf in London and The Howling. In the 2000s, they fought vampires in Underworld and wooed teens in Twilight. Whether feral or romanticized, grotesque or tragic, the werewolf continued to shift, reflecting the evolving fears and fantasies of each generation. Yet, behind every special effect and Hollywood scream lies a more unsettling truth. Real people once believed werewolves walked among them, and some still do. In the next part of our journey, we will leave behind legend and enter the realm of documented history, where accusations turned deadly and hysteria swept through villages like wildfire. Real names, real victims, real fear. Join me as we step into the chilling annals of time. Legends are easy to dismiss, stories passed from mouth to ear shaped by centuries. But what happens when myth bleeds into history? When people are accused, judged, and executed not for what they are, but for what others believe them to be? Tonight, we examine those cases. Real names etched into records. Real deaths fueled by fear, superstition, and something darker. Between 1764 and 1767, the quiet French province of Gévaudan became a landscape of terror. Over 100 people, mostly women and children, were slaughtered by what villagers described as a giant beast with fangs like sabers and a tail as thick as a man's arm. Survivors spoke of a creature that moved like a man but killed like a monster. Some claimed it walked on two legs. Others swore they saw it wearing armor. The king himself, Louis XIV, sent professional hunters. Wolves were killed, trophies claimed. But the attacks continued. Panic spread like wildfire. One man, Jean Chastel, ultimately took credit for slaying the beast in 1767. He used a silver bullet. Sound familiar? Historians now suggest it was likely a large wolf or exotic animal perhaps, trained to attack, but others whisper of a man who dressed in hides and hunted the helpless. A killer who wore the face of a beast. The line between animal and man. In Gévaudan, it was razor thin. The werewolf hysteria didn't end in the woods. It found its way into courts, torture chambers, and execution grounds. In 16th century Europe, werewolf trials were as real and as deadly as witch hunts. Peter Stump, a German farmer from Bedburg, was one of the most infamous cases. In 1589, he was accused of being a werewolf. Tortured until he confessed, Stump claimed he had made a pact with the devil. He wore a magic belt, he said, that turned him into a wolf. His crimes, cannibalism, incest, murder, they tore him apart on the breaking wheel. His daughter and mistress were executed too. Historians today see this as a case of religious persecution, political scapegoating, or even mental illness. But to the people of Bedburg, a monster had been slain. Then there was Gilles Garnier, known as the Werewolf of Dole. He too confessed under torture to hunting and eating children. Found guilty in 1573, Garnier was burned at the stake. Such punishments were not unique. In Estonia, Tis of Kaltenbrunn claimed to be a good werewolf, one who battled witches in hell to protect crops. He was flogged and exiled. The idea of a man turning into a beast through curse, pact, or madness was not just superstition, it was law. But what if these people weren't monsters, just misunderstood? Let us consider clinical lycanthropy, a rare psychological condition in which individuals believe they can transform into animals. They growl, claw, even claim to see fur on their bodies. Often, these episodes are tied to schizophrenia, psychosis, or trauma. Could Peter Stump or Gilles Garnier have been suffering from such delusions? Could their confessions, extracted under unimaginable pain, have been the ravings of broken minds? And what about the villagers? In times of plague, famine, and war, people seek explanations, anything to make sense of suffering. And so, blame falls on the outsider, the strange, the mentally ill, the misunderstood. What we call mob hysteria, they call justice. Scene fades to black and white sketches of medieval trials. Wide-eyed, peasants, men tied to stakes, wolves in the margins of illuminated texts. History shows us again and again, the real monsters often wear human faces, But sometimes, just sometimes, the belief in something darker is enough to make it real. The werewolf trials were not fantasy. They were fear, systematized. Fear of the unknown, of the outsider, of the darkness within us all. And though we now view these cases through a lens of science and skepticism, they serve as a chilling reminder. Myth can kill, belief can burn, and the line between man and monster is often drawn in blood. Let's take a step back from the smoke and fire of the past and step into the light of science. Because while tales of transformation ignite the imagination, they rarely hold up to scrutiny under the microscope. Tonight we ask, is there any truth to the werewolf myth, or are we chasing shadows? To begin, we confront a simple question. Can a human being physically transform into a wolf? From a scientific standpoint, the answer is unequivocally no. Our DNA, our skeletal structure, our internal organs are vastly different from those of canines. A transformation like the ones described in Folklore would require instantaneous, radical reconfiguration of the human body. Bones stretching and reshaping, muscle mass changing, the nervous system rewiring in real time. Even with modern genetic engineering, such a metamorphosis is biologically impossible. There is no virus, no hormone, no magical belt that can rewrite the genome on command. And yet, people believed it. Some still do. So why? Sometimes, what appears to be a monster is simply misunderstood. Across history, several rare conditions may have fueled the werewolf legend. Hypertrichosis, often called werewolf syndrome, causes excessive hair growth all over the body. Those afflicted were sometimes exhibited in freak shows, their appearance used to reinforce tales of the beastman. Rabies, a viral disease spread by animal bites, can cause aggression, hallucinations, and a fear of water or bright lights. Sound familiar? Infected individuals may have acted erratically, even violently, giving rise to fears of transformation. Porphyria, a group of disorders affecting the skin and nervous system, may have contributed to myths as well. Symptoms include sensitivity to sunlight, facial disfigurement, and even red-colored teeth. But even more telling than biology is what lies in the mind. Let's return to clinical lycanthropy, a psychological disorder in which an individual believes they have transformed into an animal, most commonly a wolf. While rare cases have been recorded across the globe, sufferers may howl, crawl on all fours, and behave as if they are predators. Underlying conditions often include schizophrenia, dissociative identity disorder, or severe trauma. In 1985, a man was admitted to a psychiatric hospital in the Netherlands, claiming to be a werewolf. He exhibited violent behavior and spoke in growls. Under treatment, he later expressed remorse, fully believing he had become a beast. These are not fairy tales. These are real delusions fueled by stress, isolation, or past abuse, and often reinforced by cultural stories and personal belief systems. And in mass society, enter mass hysteria, the rapid spread of collective illusions. A single animal attack, a shadow in the woods, a misunderstood illness, each could ignite panic in isolated communities. Add superstition, religious dogma, and fear of the other, and a werewolf is born. When we unravel the werewolf, we don't find fur and fangs. We find fear, ignorance, and the human mind's fragile balance. Even today, the idea of the animal within persists. We describe people as predators. We warn of the beast inside. These are not just metaphors, they are deep evolutionary archetypes. So while we may scoff at silver bullets and full moons, the werewolf persists. Not in the woods, but in our culture, our stories, and our psyches. Perhaps the werewolf never needed to be real. Perhaps it was always meant to be a mirror for the animal inside us all. The werewolf may not walk among us, but it lives in our stories. From blood-soaked medieval scrolls to high-budget Hollywood blockbusters, this creature of the night has remained a cultural constant, its form evolving with the fears and fascinations of every generation. It adapts, it survives, and more importantly, it speaks to something primal. Let's explore why the werewolf never truly dies. The werewolf's earliest literary roots trace back to ancient Greece. In the Satyricon, Petronius tells of a man who transforms into a wolf under the moonlight. In Norse sagas, warriors known as berserkers were said to don wolf pelts and enter a trance-like rage in battle. And in Ovid's Metamorphoses, the story of King Lycaon, turned into a wolf for attempting to feed human flesh to the gods, gives us the very origin of the word lycanthropy. But it was the Middle Ages that solidified the werewolf as a figure of terror, aligned with Satan, feared by villagers, hunted by inquisitors. As society changed, so did the wolf. By the 19th and 20th centuries, the werewolf found new life in literature. In The Wolf Leader by Alexandre Dumas and The Werewolf by Clemens Hausmann, the creature was no longer just a monster. It became a symbol of internal struggle and moral ambiguity. Then came Hollywood. The 1941 classic, The Wolfman, cemented the archetype we know today: cursed man, full moon, involuntary transformation. It introduced ideas like silver bullets and the tragic anti-hero, doomed to become what he hates. In the decades that followed, the werewolf appeared in every genre imaginable: horror, An American Werewolf in London, The Howling; comedy, Teen Wolf; What We Do in the Shadows; romance, Twilight, Blood and Chocolate; even animation and gaming, from Scooby-Doo to The Witcher to Skyrim. But why does it endure? Why does the image of the half-man, half-beast still grip us so tightly? The answer lies in the beast behind the metaphor. The werewolf is more than a monster. It is a symbol, a canvas for our darkest questions. What lurks beneath the civilized skin? What happens when reason loses control? Are we ever truly free of our animal instincts? In the werewolf, we find a reflection of our rage, our lust, our fears of becoming unrecognizable to ourselves. It is the ultimate duality: man and monster, human and predator, guilt and release. And as society evolves, so too does the werewolf's purpose. In modern times, the creature often stands in for the outcast, a misunderstood being battling something within. Werewolves in today's media are not always villains. Sometimes they're heroes, protectors, victims. We no longer burn them. We relate to them. Through war, plague, isolation, and anxiety, the werewolf has followed us, changing shape, voice, and purpose. It's not the monster we fear. It's the reminder that we too can change. The werewolf, myth, monster, metaphor. A creature that walks the edge between man and beast, civilization and chaos, sanity and madness. We've traveled through ancient legends and dark forests of the past. We've examined real cases, some tragic, some terrifying. We've peeled back the layers of biology and the folds of the mind. We've seen how stories shape our world. But now we ask, what does it all mean? At its core, the werewolf is a reflection, not of nature, but of us. We invented the creature to explain what we didn't understand: violent crimes, sudden illness, unexplainable urges. The werewolf became the scapegoat for the unexplainable. But deeper still, it represents our most primal fear: losing control of our bodies, of our thoughts, of our place in society. We see the werewolf as a warning sign, a dark mirror that, buried beneath the suit, the smile, the daily routine, there is something older, hungrier. And yet, we are drawn to it because sometimes we want to let it out. Today, we don't burn witches or hunt beasts by moonlight, but we still face fear, still create scapegoats, still wrestle with duality. The werewolf myth survives because it adapts to new realities. In a world of stress and societal pressure, the idea of transformation, of shedding constraints if only for a night, can feel liberating, cathartic, even empowering. But even in fiction, freedom comes at a price. The werewolf reminds us every instinct has consequences. Every desire, its shadow. That's the true horror and the true brilliance of the myth. There's something else too. Something quieter, more ancient. The werewolf myth isn't just about fear of animals. It's about our connection to them. The wolf is not only predator, it is kin. It symbolizes loyalty, pack bonds, survival, strength. In werewolf stories, we see both the threat of losing our humanity and the temptation of returning to nature. In a modern world where we are often disconnected from the wild, the werewolf becomes a symbol of reconnection, even if it's terrifying. The werewolf may not be real. Not in the way old villagers feared, not in the silver bullet kind of way. But myths are not lies. They are symbols, containers of truth, echoes of what we feel but cannot say. And in that sense, werewolves are as real as grief, as rage, as wonder. They teach us about duality, self-control, and the lines we draw between ourselves and the wild. They remind us that every human story is, in some small way, a struggle against the beast within. So, whether you believe the old stories or not, remember this: the werewolf's greatest strength was never its claws. It was its ability to survive, inside us all. If you enjoyed this story and want more chilling legends and terrifying tales, make sure to like this video. It really helps us out. You can also click on our Ultimate Werewolf playlist to watch more horror and cryptid stories. The link is in the description below. And if you love horror, folklore, and unexplained mysteries, subscribe to the channel and join our growing community of fear seekers. But don't stop there. Turn on notifications by clicking the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Because in the world of horror, the scariest things happen when you least expect them. And trust me, you don't want to be left in the dark. Welcome to the darkness.